Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Higurashi When They Cry. It's your boy Karagol Gaming, and you know how we do things around here. The 11th chapter of chapter 1, if that makes sense. If it doesn't, go check the previous episodes and it will make sense once you realize what it says on the save slot. Anyway, let's get on with it. So we want to get to school before anyone else to secure the bed, right? This was the first time I had ever woke up with such clarity. It was 5:59, just moments before my alarm would go off. I was amazed at the precision of my internal clock. Yeah, you're amazed now because you have somewhere to be this early, but how amazed are you gonna be on a fucking Sunday when you wake up at 5:59, brother? I had made preparations for the next day of school before I went to bed. I changed quickly and descended to the deserted lower floor. I was speedrunning my day. It appeared that my mom was still asleep. Neither breakfast nor lunch was ready. Yesterday, I just unilaterally declared that I would be leaving early today, so it couldn't be helped. I slathered jam on some bread and topped it with some instant cocoa. Just as I was finishing up breakfast, Mom rose groggily from her slumber.
あら、ケイチ、今日は早いのね。学校の行事か何か？
別に。
Answering bluntly, I picked up my bag and stood after stuffing 2 slices of bread down my throat.
もう行くの？お弁当は？
Don't worry about it.
もうちょっと待ってくれないとできないわよ。
If I waited for her to make my lunch, then it would end up being the same time as usual. If I did that, it would raise the chances of me running into Rena and Mion on the way. Chances? I don't know. Risk? Yeah, that's how I would put it. Yes. From today onwards, I was gonna go to school alone.
今日はいいよ。
じゃあお昼はどうするの？
I'll find 2 slices of bread and shove it down my throat.
抜け出して商店で菓子パンでも買うよ。
そう。じゃあこれ、お昼代ね。
TY.
ちゃんとレシート持ってくるのよ。
But why? I took the 1,000 yen bill from Mom and slipped it into my pocket.
こんなに早いけど、レナちゃんたちもこんなに早いの？
いや、俺だけ。
レナちゃんには早く出るって伝えてあるの？
She's not my mom, Mom. I have no reason to tell her every little detail now, do I? Finding it difficult answering the onslaught of questions, I made an annoyed face.
レナが来たら、ケイチは先に行ったって伝えてよ。
ちょっとケイチ、待ちなさい。
It's not that I didn't trust my parents. I just couldn't rely on them. They couldn't help me. I could only hope that they did not get involved. Safer that way. My mom's annoying voice was cut off by the slam of the door. For the first time since I moved here, I headed down the road to school alone. You say her food is disgusting, you say her voice is annoying. Fam, you might live to regret those words, given the history and behavior of this fucking village and people dying. Up until now, I had always walked down the same path at the same time each day. So I always met with the same people at the same places. But today was different. I didn't meet the people I would normally meet, and nobody was at the places where I would normally have met them. You're making it sound like it's a scene out of Truman Show, dude. Of course, Rena wasn't in the spot where we usually met, and there wasn't anyone at the spot where we would have met up with Mion. We get it, dude. Fuck it. Nobody is where... Dude! The length of the trees, the morning air, and the brightness of the sun. It was a completely different type of morning from what I was used to. Without a doubt, it felt strange. No, it felt early, motherfucker. It left me with the impression that I had destroyed the illusion that Hinamizawa had set up for me before it had enough time to prepare all of the props needed to deceive me.
あら、ケイチくん。今朝は早いわね。みんなで早朝から待ち合わせ？
The person who called out to me was someone we always passed by as they were taking a walk along the edge of the fields. Their name was, I forgot. I never knew it in the first place. Of course, this wasn't the spot where we usually passed each
今朝は
other.
早くに目が覚めちゃったので、あまり気にしないでください。
I threw out a random excuse.
レナちゃんやミオンちゃんはどうしたんだい？
Mind your business, villager!
今日は一人なの？
What's up with the 21 questions, dog?
ええ、まあ。
I was being asked the same type of questions my mom was asking, so I answered them in the same uninteresting, vague manner. It wasn't funny being asked where Rena was each time I passed by someone. But maybe it was to be expected. It was because for so long we were always together so amicably. Even I felt that if I let my guard down, we could still be friends. Stop it, Keiichi. Don't think about that, Keiichi. You spent all day thinking about how dangerous it was to go soft, didn't you? Look at you now, you're going soft. Pause. Beep beep beep. A car horn blared from out of nowhere. Even though I was walking lost in thought, that horn was way too close. A mechanical behemoth barreled at me from behind, catching me completely off guard. By the time I turned around, the van's hulking chassis was almost on top of me. I had seen plenty of cars veer to the opposite shoulder to avoid pedestrians, but this car was doing the opposite. It felt like there was somebody on the opposite shoulder and the van was swerving in my direction to avoid them. That blissfully ignorant train of thought delayed me from realizing something much, much more important. That large mass was hurtling right towards me. Was it going to hit me? The inside of my head instantly flooded with a painfully cold liquid. In that moment, the scene before me, time itself had frozen. In the silence of that frozen moment, I compared the van so close that I had no way to dodge it, and my body, the upper half twisted awkwardly in order to look behind me. There was no way I could dive out of the way in my current position. If I lost focus now, this moment would unpause and I would probably be plowed over, caught in this silly pose. Bend my upper body towards the paddy by the side of the road. If I bent far enough, I would get away with just being hit by the side view mirror. As soon as the thought crossed my mind, the temporal stasis was shattered by the deafening sound of the van. The side of the mirror struck my shoulder, sending me spinning off through the air like a top. A top of what? Locked into my contorted position. Splash. Sent tumbling through the air, I crashed into the muddy paddy by the side of the road. My entire body was soiled and drenched. But the choice I had made in that instant was unmistakably for the best. I was covered in mud, but when the alternative was being hit by the car, it was the closest thing I could be to being unscathed. Rising up from the paddy, I had enough in me to glare over to the stopped van and yell profanities at the driver. It stopped. I'm not sure if it was able to see me, but the van sped off. What a douchebag.
待てよクソこれってひき逃げって言うんじゃねえのかよ
I couldn't help but continue yelling out profanities. The disgrace from being covered in mud hurt me more than any physical wounds. I slogged through the muddy paddy and made my way back onto the road.
これって犯罪じゃねえのかよチクショー
Shit, I'll track you down and sue your ass. If I go looking for a van, I'm sure I'll find it in this little ass village. The path I was on had rice paddies on either side, and it had become so narrow that one car could barely fit through. It wasn't a place you could tear full speed down in a car, let alone pass by pedestrians. Not only was it a narrow road, but the car just now was closer to my side of the road than the other when it went past me. Even as I cursed, I was desperately trying to suppress the dark cloud roiling up within me. This wasn't just a hit and run. That car just now was trying to run me over, wasn't it? I don't know. I mean, yeah. Most signs point towards that. But if they really wanted to kill you, then why would they honk their horns? Thinking back, I did feel like there had been a car creeping up on me slowly for a while. That's right. As soon as I had parted ways with that person taking a walk, I had that feeling the whole time. You might be getting a little paranoid, but I don't know. If it had wanted to pass me, then it had no shortage of chances. Normally, I would have felt suspicious and turned around sooner. The most suspicious thing about this is he sped off. Why would he do that? But I was lost in thought and was now kicking myself for not realizing it was there sooner. And then, the path became narrow and there was no one else in sight. He floored it. If I had hesitated for even a moment, the result would have been no laughing matter. As the adrenaline rush from nearly being run over subsided and the realization of just how terrifying the preceding events were sunk in, that flow of this entire sentence or segment right here was weird. There was no doubt about it. That van was intentionally trying to hit me. A cold viscous sweat seeped from my scalp and slid down my back before dribbling off. I struggled to avoid falling into a panic. There was still the possibility that this really was just an accident. Calm down, Keiichi! But also don't be naive, Keiichi! Being that lax will get you killed next time. You need to always be on your toes. That's the type of world you live in now. Don't give them any openings. If my enemy was really out to kill me, then next time they would use a more reliable method. If that time came and I was acting like I was now, getting covered in mud was the price I had paid for my own naivete. Covered in mud, but without injury. Not even a sprain. I guess this is what you call the silver lining. I began walking again, this time cautiously. I wouldn't even show a hint of carelessness. I had suspected only Rena and the others, up until now. Nah, it was because I had suspected them that I had believed there were no other enemies. Oishi-san had said so, didn't he? There was a possibility of a village conspiracy. Was I really mired so deeply in this situation that I had no choice but to try and carry on as usual? Wouldn't it be the safest to just hole myself up in my house? But the moment I abandoned my regular routine, everyone around me would abandon theirs as well. That was just too horrifying of a thought. I recall the tales Oishi-san told me, of when Hinamizawa was still called Onikakushi. A frightening tale of an entire village of demons hunting down their prey, surrounding them and eating them alive. One must not interfere with the demons. One must pretend not to see it. The enemy were numerous, the whole village. The villagers with their unwavering faith in the curse would do nothing to help me. The strong sudden flash of sunshine made me slightly dizzy. I had no idea what was going on anymore. When I suspected it was the work of man, I would catch a glimpse of Oyashiro-sama's curse. And when I suspected it was Oyashiro-sama's curse, someone would poke their head out. What was coincidence? What was intentional? Who was my enemy? Who was just a bystander? No, what I really truly wanted to know, how did I end up with the proverbial bullseye painted on my back? Eventually, an answer in a form I could understand will appear. I don't care when that will happen, because until then, I cannot die. That alone fueled my resolve to fight and will keep me alive. I remembered seeing the metal bat in the gym storage shed, but there was a padlock on the door barring my entry. At the very least, I wanted to get my hands on it before everyone else arrived at the school. I circled around the school grounds impatiently. But all I could find were things like pieces of lumber, nothing that I could bring into the classroom easily. Then, I had an epiphany. I should search inside the classroom. If it was something in the classroom to begin with, then there wouldn't be a problem. I could tell that everyone's indoor shoes were still in their lockers. Good thing I came early, nobody else was here yet. I wondered, what could I find in the classroom? I didn't think I could find an especially effective weapon like a bat, but it couldn't be helped at this point. Until the gem storage shed was open, I needed to find a substitute. A lingering hint of naivete whispered that there was no way I would be attacked at school. But such soft ideas would no longer protect me. To think that they were slowly making their way into parts of my life that I had once thought impenetrable. In the worst case, my own house might not even be safe anymore. That was an incredibly frightening thought. But I believe that not considering the worst case scenario would have been even more frightening. Anyways, I will survive. So long as I live, then I will definitely be able to escape this labyrinth of nonsense. Definitely. My exploration of the classroom came to an impasse. That much was to be expected. There was no way there would be anything that could be a weapon in the classroom. In case of emergency, there probably was nothing I could do but swing my own chair around. My gaze landed on the lockers that had come to be used for personal storage. The locker that Mion used to store her pile of games was among them. There was one for each person in class all lined up. Of course, there was one for me as well. Oh yeah, there was supposed to be still a tracksuit in my locker. Seeing me covered in mud would be strange. I should go change later. But first, I needed a weapon. If one of my classmates came, it would be hard to rummage through all the lockers. I swiftly began opening up the lockers one by one. They were mostly filled with things like gym clothes, personal items, and umbrellas. An umbrella. If I couldn't find anything better, then this would have to be my weapon. I was about to give up on finding anything decent when I opened up a locker that held exactly what I wanted. It was without a doubt a metal bat. It was well worn and pretty beaten up, but there was no doubt it was usable. In that locker that reeked of mold, there also hung a baseball uniform. It was probably the locker of a student in a Pee-wee league or something like that. If that was the case, then he would probably ask for it back. At that time, I could hear the voices of the children scuffling their way noisily from the hallway. Amongst them, I could make out Rika-chan and Satoko.
おはようございますです。あらあらあら、今朝はお早いですわね、ケイチさん。
Indeed I am. I nonchalantly hid the bat I was holding behind my back.
なんなんですの、その身なりは。泥だらけでしたよ。
ああ、まあちょっとあってな。すぐ着替えるから勘弁しろ。
With that said, I began taking off my clothes. Satoko began to blush just as I expected her to.
レディーの前でお着替えなんてしつけがなってませんことよ。
着替えをじーっと見てるレディもしつけがなってないと思うぞ。
Fam, actually, this is a pretty good time to tell you an embarrassing fact about me. This was... second grade? It was during a time when schools employed this program to teach their students how to swim, right? And I had no idea of how the process would be handled. Like, I had no idea because we didn't have like a physical meetup with the entire class. So I had no idea, like, should I meet up with my class first and then we would go to the locker rooms, change, whatever. So what I did was I had strolled fully clothed, pretty much, yes, fully clothed, all the way to the pools where my classmate saw me and she was like, yo, why aren't you changed? You should be ready to jump into the pool when the teacher gets here and when the instructor gets here, right? And me being the dumb fuck kid that I am, and I have zero tact and I have zero situational awareness, basically, I begin to strip down in front of everybody at the pool. And I still remember the look she gave me to this day. Like, I just dropped everything, mate. Like, let me get into my swimming shorts. No worries. I got this. I know, zero fucks given at a young age, mate. Zero fucks given. Then I actually ran out and, you know, stuffed my shit in a locker somewhere. Cause I was like paranoid, I don't trust nobody. I had terrible eyesight, dude. I wasn't trusting nobody. Like, hey man, do I know you? Let me get closer. It's like, I was a fucked up child, mate. Fucked up child. So I would run to the locker, stuff my shit, run back in, just wait until they gave us this fucking inflatable balloon or whatever the fuck ever to keep us afloat while they taught us all the butterfly swimming techniques or whatever the fuck ever did. But that look, I just dropped everything, mate. Butt naked, boom. Anyway, I would think that a lady staring at someone who was changing would be one lacking in tact.
男子は更衣室がないんだから諦めろ。
As Satoko feigned disgust, she went into the hall, still blushing. Conversely, Rika-chan continued to stare at me, preparing to change.
リカちゃんもレディーなら着替えを見てるのは良くないと思うぞ。
僕はレディーじゃないですからいいのです。
Are you an old man too? She deliberately pouted and looked at me with upturned eyes.
じゃあリカちゃんも今からレディーだ。
レディーなら仕方ありませんです。
Rika-chan, appearing to be satisfied with being considered a lady, what the fuck, made her way to join Satoko in the hallway. Just as I breathed a sigh of relief, Rika-chan stopped suddenly and turned back toward me.
圭一は野球を始めますですか？
It seemed that Rika-chan had noticed the bad.
ああ、ちょっとさ、体がなまってさ、ちょっと素振りでも始めようかなってな。
健康に気を使うのはとても良いことだと思いますです。
She was talking like an old lady despite her appearance. After saying that, Rika-chan started to leave again, but stopped and looked back at me once more.
そのバット、なくさないでくださいね、です。
Ah, that's giving me the chills right there. It seems she already knew I took it out of someone's locker. There was no name on the locker door. It's probably Satoshi's, isn't it? I didn't know whose bat it was, but I would be borrowing it until they complained. It wouldn't be for long, just until the gym storage shit was opened. After quickly changing into the tracksuit, I checked the time. I still had plenty of time before class began because I came so early. And just to fucking clarify, right? The last that I changed in front of was like one of my closest friends at the time. So I was very comfortable. I wouldn't do it with any classmate or stranger, you know what I'm saying? I was like, yo, thanks for looking out for me. You warned me that I had to change, so I'm gonna go ahead and do that because I'm a quick changer. Like, done. I took the bat in one hand and went out to the schoolyard. That was, of course, to practice my swing. I needed to make it known that I would always have a bat on me so I could practice my swing. At some point, the sunlight had become even stronger. Disregarding my classmates as they made their way to school, I took my position in the shadow of the school building. I wasn't the academic type, and I wasn't much of an athlete either. I might get muscle pain if I just suddenly started swinging. I should at least start with some warm-up, some stretching. I doubt anyone would think I was doing something out of the ordinary, which was the exact opposite of my actual mental state. I gripped the bat and swung lightly. The bat was by no means light. The weight would make it a reliable weapon when I needed it to be. Of course, I could only pray that the moment that I needed to use this as a weapon would never come. Just carrying it around could deter any attacks against me. At least, that's what I hoped.
あれ？ケイちゃん？あんた何やってんの？
Being bombarded with such hysterical voice, I jumped.
ああ、ケイチくん、野球部だよ。野球部だよ。
It was these two bitches.
先に行ったって言われて驚いたけど、
見てわからないかよ。素振りだよ。甲子園だよ。別にダイエットでもいいぞ。
ダイエットってケイちゃん、そんなに太ってたっけ？
ああ、知らなかったろ。実は三段腹なんだ。もちもちでタプタプなんだぞ。
もちもちでタプタプ。
レナ、変な想像しなくていいぞ。
To disrupt Rena from imagining things that vulgar, I ruffled her hair messily. Vulgar? Jiggly Belly is vulgar.
じゃあまあ、頑張って県大会を目指してちょうだいよ。おじさん応援してるわ。野球部の強い高校、教えよっか？そこにいる左腕の亀田くんが、すごいピッチャーなんだけどさ。頑張ってね。
It seems they've already taken me for a baseball nut, but oh well. What do you mean? It's like fucking southpaw. You're talking about boxing terms, fam. Well, if I really did make it to the championship, it would be a cinch. After all, I would be the pitcher and the catcher. I would pitch the ball, then run past that ball as you threw and change over to being the catcher in the burst of super incredible explosive speed. I laughed dryly at the ludicrous image. Coming back to my senses, I smashed the bat against the ground.
くそ何笑ってんだよ俺
What the fuck is wrong with this man? Stop ruining your weapon. I pounded the ground over and over. With each impact, the reverberation traveling through the bat stung my hands. If they smile at me like that, I'll... Don't allow anyone close to me. Don't trust no one. No matter how many times I tell myself that, if they made me smile like that, I'll... I already knew quite well that there were demons dwelling in my smiling friends, but I just couldn't believe it. Did that kind of split personality really exist? Yeah, motherfucker, it seems it starts with you. Like how Rena confessed to the doctor, were they simply being possessed by Oyashiro-sama? In other words, did a supernatural being like Oyashiro-sama really exist, and was it possessing everyone to try and kill me? Yeah, that would be wonderful. If only everyone were actually my friends all along, and everything was all just Oyashiro-sama's fault?
前原圭一のバカ野郎だから
I yelled out, drawing out all the power from the pit of my stomach and raised the bat violently into the air. He-Man, or are you going Super Saiyan?
甘えるんじゃね
As I screamed out with all my might, I beat the metal bat into the ground over and over. With every impact, my weakness was being beaten down. Smash! Forget! Smash! Don't be soft! Smash! Don't your enemy! Smash! Like hell I'd let them kill me! My shoulders heaving up and down from my ragged breathing, I heard the first bell ring just as I calmed down. The closest thing I have to an ally is Rika-chan. That's the closest thing. Or that's the closest one, I should say. I gasped with sudden realization. That was the final bell. As I felt all tension drained from me, I let out a deep breath. My mind was in a muddled state for much of the entire day. I didn't feel like I was awake, but it didn't feel like I was asleep either. I couldn't say it felt especially comfortable, but I felt kind of a relief that the sanctity of the school part of my daily life had yet to be violated. How long would I have to keep on living like this? I could only grit my teeth and bear with it as this living hell slowly gnawed away at me.
ケイチくん
Nope,
やろうやろ
fuck that.
う部活の時間なんだよ
Club these nuts! The sound of Rena's voice brought me back to my senses.
ほらほらケイちゃんぼーっとしない机を寄せて寄せて
Everyone was moving their desks together as usual. That's right, it was happy fun club time! But I had no intention of taking part. I haphazardly stuffed the contents of my desk into my bag as I prepared to go home. It was a weak-handed gesture to avoid having to actually say, I'll be going home now.
なんだよケイちゃん今日も直帰なわけ
Yeah. Mion sounded quite disappointed.
気分が乗らないんだしばらくほっといてくんないかな
The tone of the words that spilled from my mouth matched Mion's disapproving glare. It felt like the air in the room had dried out. Satoko looked like she was about to say something, but perhaps dissuaded by the mood, she swallowed her words and stayed silent. Nobody said a thing. I took that to mean that I could leave if I wanted. But the collective gaze of the four of them, like the tiny pins used to mount an insect in a display, held me in place. Rena was the one who cut through the heavy mood.
ケイチくんやっぱり女の子と一緒に遊ぶのなんか嫌だったかな
She said it in such a melancholic tone that it sent a wave of pain racing through my heart. If this pain was going to kill me, I wanted it to be the soft part of me that could still feel pain. I tore at my chest, violently tearing out the pins that held me in place.
そういうわけじゃねえよ
I had only been hurting myself by saying anything more, so I swallowed my words. Cutting things off there, I turned away and exited the classroom. They didn't speak a word to me as I left. It was a long, dull trip back home, but I did not lose focus. I firmly squeezed the grip of the bat, which was already soggy from sweat. Realizing that, I wiped it down with my sleeve. If something were to happen, I wouldn't want it to be slippery. Since this morning, I had become especially sensitive to the presence of cars. Even while walking, my ears pricked up and sought out threatening sounds and presences that could be closing in. And that was why I could hear it. Without a doubt, there were footsteps. Those footsteps had matched up perfectly with mine for a while now. From what I could sense, it was just one person. But I had no intention of being careless. Did they intend to follow me like that car this morning until we were in a good location to assault me? Then it wasn't a good idea to keep walking like this. I stopped walking and looked back. The wooded path crowded with trees responded with silence as if there was nobody there to begin with. But I would not be fooled. I was certain footsteps were following me. And just as I stopped, the footsteps stopped as well. Meaning, the person following me wanted to keep their distance. That was without question proof that I was their target. I held my breath, waiting for that presence to panic and start moving again. The trees rustled with the sound of the wind. The Higurashi also joined in the dissonant chorus, trying to throw my focus into disarray. Had 5 minutes passed? Or had I been like this for a whole 30 minutes? It was so hard to breathe that I might have suffocated. It seemed I would be the first one to panic. Without a doubt, he was lurking in the shade of that tree with bated breath. Then, I would make the first move. I fixed my grip on the bat. I raised it up to my shoulder to be ready to swing it at any given time.
おい、いるんだろそこに。
With all of my might, I screamed at whoever was hiding in the shade of the trees. But the presence in the shade did not budge. Until the moment I found them, they had no intention of revealing themselves.
分かってんだよ。そこにいるのはよ。
I screamed out angrily at them, but even still, they did not move at all. Then I'll go over there myself. With all due vigilance, I approached step by step. Stepping into the tree's shadow, I saw a human figure there. That figure was curled up like a small animal.
レナ。
When she realized I had found her, her expression softened. She seemed apologetic, but wasn't going to speak a word.
なんか俺に用かよ。
I wouldn't accept that silence and screamed a question at her.
別に、
Rena was in a panic with tears welling up in her eyes. But it was obvious that she had been following me.
部活はどうしたんだよ。
ケイチ君がお休みしたから、レナもお休み。
関係ないだろ。俺なんか気にしないで遊んでろよ。
だって、ケイチ君のこと心配で。
You made me this way, fam. Thinking about how I had been acting up until now, it wasn't hard to imagine that my behavior could have been perceived as strange. So Rena was concerned. At a quick glance, that's how it would seem. But I wasn't going to let my guard down that easily. Even if that really was the case, she still wouldn't have to do something like try to tail me. She should have called out to me when I was leaving and gone out right with me. But Rena didn't do that. She kept her distance from me and matched my walking speed. She was stalking me, and she has been stalking me for quite some time. On top of that, she matched the sound of her footsteps and deviously tried to hide her presence from me. So she was with me on that road with the car earlier today. Then after she realized I noticed she was there, she held her breath as she tried to hide from me. She wore a timid expression that would force one to take pity on her, but without a doubt, she was tailing me.
もうついてくんなよ。
Still glaring at Rena, I continued walking onwards. After I had walked for a bit, she ignored my command and began walking again, so I yelled at her once more.
ついてくるなって言ってるだろ。
だってレナの家も同じ方向だし。
Then you go on ahead.
じゃあレナが先を歩けよ。レナが見えなくなったら俺も歩く。
I moved out of the way and waved my bat violently to urge her forward.
レナはケイチ君と一緒に帰りたいな。
And I would like to go home alone. Making a pitiful expression, she meekly squeaked out the words in a voice that she knew would cut into my heart. That agitated me to no end. I knew it was a lie. If you wanted to go home together, then you should have called out to me. Now you're just blurting out some random lies.
ごめんなさい、ごめんなさい。
It seemed that the seething anger within me was written all over my face. Even without me saying anything, Rena had understood what I was feeling
分
inside.
かったならほら行けよ。
I swung the bat, urging her to walk. Rena looked back and forth between me and the bat and started walking hesitantly, and then stopped again.
早く行けよ早く。
行くから、そのバットやめてよ。
And don't you dare show up at my place tomorrow morning.
怖いの。
Rena guarded herself while pointing at me holding the bat. She may have realized that I wasn't planning on using this bat for baseball. I lowered the bat, but still guardedly opened the way for her.
行けよ。これなら文句ないだろ。
There was nothing else she could protest. She passed by me timidly, so as not to set me off. As I watched her pass by, she stopped completely after having barely moved at all.
おい立ち止まるなよ。
Uh-oh. Then, a powerful gust blew past us, barraging my face with dust. The dust got into my eyes and clouded my vision. While rubbing my eyes with my left hand, I swung blindly with my bat in my right, protecting the small opening I had presented. But Rena didn't even try to attack during that opening. Attack me? Nah, she hadn't budged an inch. I could tell from the sound of her fluttering skirt in the wind. As her skirt settled, so did the silence. She is now possessed, fam. At that moment, the voice inside of me immediately warned me of impending danger. I was caught by surprise. The smell of the air had changed. Without me realizing it, the air around me suddenly felt like a calamity was about to befall me. It was like the air had suddenly become invisible concrete, like Rena and I were locked in this space. Rena didn't move an inch. Also unable to move, I stared at her back. Rena was the first to break the silence. Instantly, she altered her stance. I felt like I had just witnessed her shift from Rena into that other person who looks like Rena. But the voice was the one I knew well, which filled me with kind of a bewildering pity. Carelessly, I felt relief upon hearing that pitiful voice.
ごめんね。聞いてもいい？
Too shy to even turn around, Rena squeezed her voice out desperately, as she trembled.
なんだよ。
どうしてバットなんか持ってるのかな？
None of your business. The question Rena asked was by no means unexpected.
俺が何を持ってたっていいだろ。
Preach.
でも、昨日まで持ってなかったし。どうして突然？
That's for you to figure out.
別に突然でもいいだろ。俺がバットを持ってるとおかしいかよ。
だって圭一君、野球とかしない人だったでしょ？おかしいよ。
I couldn't tell what kind of answer she was looking for, and I was getting kind of tired of answering her.
突然野球がしたくなったんだよ。
With your head.
それじゃおかしいか？
おかしいよ。
She answered instantly and that annoyed me slightly.
突然野球がしたくなった。素振りがしたくなったから、バットを持ち歩いてる。それのどこが変なんだよ。
変。おかしい。絶対。なんで圭一くんまで。
Why you too?
ぶつくさとうるせえやつだな。俺がスポーツに目覚めるのが、そんなに変かよ。
I tried to sound a bit more threatening to end the conversation. Until my suspicions about Rena were cleared, I had no obligation to answer her questions.
ごめんね。そんなに怒らないで。
Rena still didn't turn around and spat out words of apology one after the next.
最後に一個だけ。
Ah, shit.
一個だけ教えて。
これ以上話す気も教える気もねえよ。早く行けよ。
I yelled loudly at her, causing her to flinch like she had been struck. Seeing her in such a pathetic state caused my heart to ache sorely. But even though she was afraid, she stubbornly kept herself from moving. Before I was able to threaten her again, Rena asked her final question.
なんでバットまで同じなの？
Shit. What did she mean by the bat was the same? I had no idea what she was talking about.
お前、何言ってんだ？
だから、なんでバットまで同じなのかなって。
何を言ってんだか全然わかんねえよ。もっとはっきり言え。
Even still, Rena did not turn around. After inhaling deeply, she screamed.
だから、どうしてバットまでサトシ君と同じなの？
サトシって、え？
Upon hearing that name out of the blue, I became dumbfounded for a brief moment. By Satoshi, did she mean the student who transferred out last year? Nah, that couldn't be. Rena had tried to cover it up by saying he transferred, but the Oishi-san told me quite clearly that he was missing. So if he had transferred out, you would think that he would clear out his locker before leaving. He was the student who sat at my seat up until last year. He was believed to have been demoned away by Oyashiro-sama's curse. I didn't know the details about his disappearance. The aunt he lived with was killed the night of Watanagashi by a drug addict, and not long after that, he suddenly vanished and was now missing. Have we confirmed that it was a drug addict? Huh. That Satoshi and I were, what? My gaze fell to the bat in my hands. Could it be? Satoshi Hojo. It was a bit difficult to see, but that was what was written on that white tape at the end of the bat. I see. So this was Satoshi's bat.
ああ、これ、サトシのバットだったんだな。誰も使ってなかったんで、ちょっと借りたんだよ。いいだろ、それくらい。
そんなことじゃないの。
The way Rena had said that made it seem like this bat was something that should never be touched. Like it was some sort of offering at a shrine, or a memento of the deceased. I could only stand there, perplexed and unable to respond. Rena continued speaking without waiting for a reply.
サトシ君の時と、どうしてそんなにまで同じなの？
When it happened to him? Rena was talking about more than just the bat belonging to Satoshi.
サトシ君もそうだった。野球チームには入ってたけど、本当は野球なんか好きじゃない人だったのに。
それが俺とどう関係が？
サトシ君も、ある日突然バットを持ち歩き始めたの。チームに入ってただけで、スポーツなんかしない人だったのに。
What about it? I closed my mouth before I could say that one out loud. Listen carefully, Keiichi. Rena is trying to tell us something important.
サトシ君もね、ある日突然一人で登校するようになったの。ケイチ君みたいに。そしてね、ある日突然素振りの練習を始めたの。ケイチ君みたいに。そしてね、ある日突然バットを持ち歩くようになったの。ケイチ君みたいに。そしてね、ある日突然。
Then one day suddenly what? Rena had swallowed her words. Rena's sudden silence brought a hush back around the surrounding area. It was then I could finally digest the content of the entire conversation. She was saying my chain of actions was exactly the same as Satoshi's. What was the meaning of this? Up until now, I had forgotten all about Satoshi. I had never paid much thought to him in the first place. Not only that, I didn't even know anything about what he had done. My actions today should have been my own creation after all the planning I had done. But they had been the same exact one as Satoshi's? Then more importantly, if both Satoshi and I acted the same, then there was a really good possibility that what happened after would be the same as well.
レナ、ある日突然、サトシはどうしたんだよ。
Rena knew. She knew what became of Satoshi. Nah, forget about what happened to the guy in the past. Rena knew what was going to happen to me.
答えろよ、レナ。サトシはどうしたんだよ。
With that, I grabbed Rena's shoulder violently and forcibly turned her around to face me. As I faced her, I felt a jolt travel through my entire body.
言ったよね、ケイチ君。
It was that person that I did not know. At least, it definitely wasn't the Rena Ryuga I had been talking up until this point. That voice just now did not have a trace of the trembling or emotion that it had before. The amount of regret I felt for turning her around so carelessly was unsurpassed. That gaze pierced through like a cold needle, the smile on her face that invoked an image of having been carved out by a knife. Chills went down my spine. My mind froze under a layer of rhyme. Woo! Bars. Both of Rena's eyes pierced through mine, leaving me unable to look away. As if to remind me of that fear from that time before, Rena brought her face close to mine, so close that I could feel her breath. Her face had filled my entire field of vision. Then, her sharply shaped lips grew even sharper, like the curve of a crescent moon. She grinned.
言ったよね、ケイチ君。
After a short pause, Rena repeated the same words again.
サトシ君はね、転校しちゃったの。
Transferred meaning what? Transferred to the afterlife, bitch? What Rena meant must have been some new definition of transfer that I was previously not aware of. My throat and lips dried up. I couldn't even acknowledge what I had just heard. All I could do was swallow my own saliva. It would seem that Rena saw that as a nod. She pulled her gaze back and spryly stepped back 2-3 paces. As she did, my legs gave out and I fell to my knees pathetically. Rena and me on my knees underneath her emotionless smile. That had to be a very odd sight indeed. Seeing me in that pathetic state, she neither scoffed at me nor held out her hand. But I could neither stand nor escape with her gaze shooting through my eyes. There was undoubtedly a metal bat in my hand, but right now, it was useless to me. I was like a fly caught in her web. Heavy sweat beaded all over my body. I could feel it dripping from my skin.
しないよね、ケイチ君は。
Rena finally released me from that cage of time after what felt like an eternity. But her question was missing something important and was incredibly vague. Once again, I swallowed hard, urging her on.
何をだよ。
What did she not want me to do?
転校。
Satoshi and I had what? All my well-planned actions throughout the day turned out to have been nothing more than a reenactment of what Satoshi had done. Satoshi. Had he really been in the same situation as I was now? The friends he had gotten along with had changed suddenly, and for no reason, at least none that I had noticed, planned to kill him? Then fearing for his life as I am, he got a bat to protect himself and carried it around every day to practice his swing? And then one day, suddenly, he transferred. My blood went cold, causing a prickling sensation to course through my veins. Starting near my heart, It radiated outwards from the top of my head to the soles of my feet, chilling every part of me without recourse. What did she mean by transfer? What did she mean by transfer? Was Satoshi still at wherever he transferred to? Was he the only one who would be able to understand me? Would he be able to tell me why it all ended like this? More importantly, where did he transfer to? What did she mean by transfer? What did she mean by transfer? Before I knew it, I was at my front door. The frigid knob was hard to turn. Was nobody home? It wasn't that odd of an occurrence. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the single key attached to my first seal keychain. I stepped into the entryway. Just as I was about to take my shoes off, a chill ran down my spine. Someone had entered right behind me. Like a classmate messing around, standing right up against my back. You're fucking kidding me, right? It had to have been my imagination. Logically speaking, it was impossible for someone to be able to hide their presence within my personal space all the way through the door. But there was undoubtedly someone behind me. Hey now, Keiichi! How do you know they're there even though they're behind you? Because I could hear the sound of flowing hair. There is no other reason I would hear that sound. That was the presence, because I could hear the sound of them blinking. Keiichi, Maibara, there is no way you could hear that. My most base instincts were warning me of the presence. Common sense was telling me it was just my imagination. It was just my imagination. There was nobody behind me. I began to erase the mental image of an eerie figure standing behind me. But at the same time, I asked myself, if there was nobody, then what was I feeling as an uncomfortable sensation crawled up my spine? Actually, wouldn't it be better if there was someone there? If there was nobody there when you turned around, would you be able to accept that? I would be able to answer all those questions just by looking behind me, but I didn't have enough courage to even do that one simple task. Oh, right, I could try speaking to him. The person right behind me might answer me. It was a random thought. I didn't care how I went about it, just so long as I didn't have to turn around. If I had calmed down and thought about it, I would have known that that wouldn't have solved anything.
どなたですか?
I spoke in such a hoarse, broken voice that I couldn't believe it was my own. I could almost feel them contemplating their response. I felt it. There is no way I should be able to do that. Calm down, Keiichi. It's all in your head. That time, I was certain I heard it. As if hesitantly trying to answer my inquiry, I was certain I could hear the sound of somebody inhaling. I heard it! I heard it! I heard it clearly. It was a girl. A young girl. I didn't know who, but a tiny speck of courage in me, however reckless it was, inspired a primal yet fitting solution to this current predicament. A scream. All the force in my body released from my lungs and through my throat, ceasing all thought process in my head. Suppressing all my thoughts and emotions, I began to collapse like a house of cards. Somehow managing to twist my body and look back as I did so. It was definitely there. Right there. Somebody was there. Until the moment I turned around, until I brought the area behind me into my field of vision, they were definitely there. Falling face up, my eyes traced the remnants of the presence suspended in the empty space. It couldn't be. They were invisible. They looked like they weren't there, but they were actually still standing there. As I screamed, all the emotion I was holding back burst free in a violent wave. However, I was decidedly calm as my emotional dam collapsed. Damn. The turbulent wave of pent-up emotions was skillfully diverted into a torrent of aggression. That emotion was definitely required to extricate myself from the bizarre situation that's happening right in front of me. In my state of heightened lucidity, I entrusted my body to the fury. The metal bat held firm in my right hand as if drawn there by a magnet. A mid-level sweep would be the hardest attack to dodge. I remembered reading something like that from a book about swordsmanship or something. I brandished my will to fight. The afterimage of that amalgamation of metal flashed as it swung from left to right, beating against the entryway. The bat slammed right into the wall, the tip rebounding violently. Very calmly, I transferred the force of the rebound into a sweep to the left. The door of the shoe cupboard was split into pieces. Those two swings whiffed through empty space, but they seemed to have a great psychological impact on the enemy. I could feel the panic emanating from that space. The attack wasn't the only thing required. I extracted the bat from the cupboard it was embedded in and screamed as I spun my entire body around in a large arc. My scream shook the air, imbuing my ferocious swing with even more destructive power. Crack! Without mercy or restraint, my violent strike, with certain to fatal force behind it, shattered the top of the cupboard. None of my attacks struck the enemy, but my ferocity had certainly seemed to impact him. Breathing heavily, my entire body soaked in sweat, the invisible enemy, there, but not there, dispersed. When I was certain that the enemy had retreated, I locked the front door and latched the chain. No way. Had it only feigned retreat and was now inside my house? Once again, I channeled my aggression and searched the house for the presence, but it was gone. I had succeeded in fending it off. At that moment, the tension drained from my body and I let out a deep sigh of relief. All of the emotions I had been holding back chaotically merged together and began to flood out. A hodgepodge of fear, accomplishment, and disbelief all mixed together and began to flow through my body. Unable to deal with each individual feeling, I beat them all back with the strongest: exhaustion. Even in this moment, I remained composed. After checking out all the doors throughout the house were locked, I went up to my room on the second floor and closed the curtains. I straightened my back and tilted my head back a little bit. After clearing my mind of all my idle thoughts, I managed to calm down even more. What was that at the front door? There was definitely something there. Thinking about it, maybe it was just an apparition I had dreamt up in my confused state, but I didn't really think that was the case. Calm down, Keiichi Maibara. Compose yourself. But no matter how calmly I thought about it, what just happened wasn't a figment of my imagination. It was obviously a supernatural phenomenon, and without a doubt, something was behind me. It wasn't some sort of illusion I saw amidst my confusion and disorientation. Proof? I had just one piece. When I asked who is it, they inhaled as if they were about to answer. That sound had clearly reached my ears. The situation I was in right now was still unclear. Either I had been possessed by the supernatural phenomenon known as Oyashiro-sama's curse, or this was a ruse by the villagers who believed in it and were imitating it. Either way, their motives were unclear. The roundabout way it had been done was also still a mystery. If it was perpetrated by humans, then that would mean admitting that it was Rena and the rest of them doing it, but it would be solvable. Oishi-san and the rest of the police would surely arrest my enemy. But if it was a manifestation of Oyashiro-sama's curse, I wondered what would happen. Oishi-san very clearly declared that curses didn't exist. At that time, those words were pretty dependable, but as things were now, with the rising possibility that the perpetrators were not human, he suddenly seemed quite unreliable. If I told Oishi-san that this was the work of Oyashiro-sama's curse, what would happen? I couldn't imagine his reaction, but it would go without question that a void would expand rapidly between myself and Oishi-san. With me having so few allies to begin with, and not being able to confidently declare whether or not this was a curse, there was no merit to doing that. I would better keep the facts of what just happened at the doorway to myself. It would be better if I didn't add what happened here to the memo behind the clock. There was still the ever so slight possibility that I was actually confused when I thought I was composed, and I was just going berserk in the entryway. How wonderful would that be if that really was what happened? I would be able to refute Oyashiro-sama's curse. But if I denied Oyashiro-sama's curse, then that would mean admitting that Rena and the rest were the perpetrators. If I said that to Rena and the rest weren't the perpetrators, then that would mean believing in Oyashiro-sama's curse. But by denying both of those, I would be admitting that I myself was losing it. The three options from which I couldn't choose became a trilemma of sorts. They mixed together and formed a whirlpool in my mind, making my head spin. Once again, I straightened myself and leaned my head back to slightly cool myself down. Calm down, Keiichi. Accept what has actually happened as reality. Stop thinking of anything more than that. But I couldn't help but to think of it. How wonderful would it be if it turned out that I was delirious and everything up until now was a figment of my imagination? Oyashiro-sama's curse wouldn't exist, and I would still be the bestest of buddies with Rena and the rest. I would have to be crazy. That was the first time in my life I had ever wished for such a thing. I think we should call it an episode right here. I hate to do it to you guys. I hate to do it to myself. But we're well past an hour here. So I think I'm going to call it an episode right here. And next episode, we're going to answer the phone. Until next time, this has been your boy Karagol Gaming. I'm out of here. Love y'all and deuces.